just a quick story. We were giving this presentation at William Jewell University some years ago, and at the end of one of the sessions, mother came up to me and she said, I'm a doctor at Children's Mercy Hospital, and I have a whole wall of books about managing children, and I want you to know that this is at the top of my shelf now. And but she said, that's not the most important thing I wanted to say. My husband isn't here tonight, or he would be agreeing with me what I'm going to say, but what I really want to tell you is that I was raised in a very, very lenient home, and my husband was raised in a very strict home. And as children, we independently decided that we were going to be anything but the way we were raised. And so we switched, but we were still poles apart. And she said, I thought that maybe we would just struggle through life, and specifically and particularly with our two children, we were constantly struggling. But she said, this program has the sensitivity and the heartfelt compassion that appeals to a typical mother, and it has the logic and the rationality that appeals to the rational father. In her case, her husband was an engineer. And so she said it has brought us together. So much for the background of this. And we're going to move on into some other things rather quickly. And here's a story that brings kind of our past into focus. My son, Carson, was married to a young lady who brought into the family a 2-year-old son. And so shortly after the marriage, we were invited to their house, and Carson wanted me to help paint his trailer and so forth. So little 2-year-old Justin, who, by the way, now is a 26-year-old guy, works on the railroad, and has 3 children of his own. But at 2 years old, he was wanting to watch us, and he's really curious about the painting job. And he had this cutest little brand new yellow outfit on, and we were painting a black trailer, and I could just see him stumbling over and falling into the fender. And you know what? I would move him back, and I would say, you could fall into that. And I was careful to not give him a self-fulfilling prophecy, you're going to fall into that. And so when I wasn't looking, he did edge up closer, and he, sure enough, tripped and fell right headlong into the painted fender. And his nice yellow outfit was just black. And so it was ruined instantly. And Carson was irritated, and so he took him across to another room in the place where we were working. And I heard a whack, 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 presumably on the bottom, and some cries coming out. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to say? Because I realized in an instant of time that Carson had not seen the metamorphosis that had occurred in us, because he was raised with us, but he had been gone to school for 5 years. This is his 2nd year of marriage, and then as a junior and senior in high school, he wasn't around home much either. And so I thought, somehow I'm going to have to communicate with this kid about the change of attitude. And so he came in and he gave a big huff on his, like he got something off his chest. And I said, well, were you a little hard on the young man? And he gave me something that I will always remember. And that is, well, Dad, I just did what I thought you would have done in the same situation. And I thought, you know, all of us kind of do that, don't we? Either that, or we're like the engineer and doctor, husband and wife, who went to opposite poles. But we just do that. We instinctively do that. And so often I hear people say, well, I am my mother. I get so disgusted with that. Well, we all love our children, but love itself is not enough. And what we want to tell you, that we're just sharing what we've been given. We don't hold the notion that we have originality, but probably the way this mix comes across will seem original to you. But we feel like we've been given everything that we have, and so we're happy to share it with you. And here is
it's a system for all kind of cultures. We've had so many different cultures, and we love the Kenyans, who we really have a lot to do with them right now. But as she said, Jane said, we just, what, you gave them the rod or spank or something like that, and she said you want to find a new way to do it. So.
Okay, and here is a series of thoughts that we'll just cover real quickly. Because human nature seeks survival, we give
time to process.
Because human nature seeks interaction,
we use words thoughtfully.
And because human nature seeks respect,
we give advance notice, and we'll explain about that.
And because human nature seeks acceptance, when we use a think space,
it shows unconditional love.
And because human nature seeks some kind of power,
we give honest choices, even to 2-year-olds.
And because human nature seeks individuality,
we choose our battles carefully.
And because human nature seeks authentic development,
we guide from the inside out.
So that brings us to a flashback here, Andy Andrews. And we're going to play a comedic recitation of things that he heard his parents say. And do you know about this? You're laughing? Okay, all right. But while we're doing this, I want to draw your minds to a picture. And the director of nursing here would be an excellent one to even make this presentation. But the idea that a person gets sick all at once for no reason at all just doesn't exist, because there's always a cause, right? And a couple of you said, well, I want to raise a healthy adult. And you know, problems with adulthood or in adulthood don't just happen suddenly. I have a good friend who's a counselor, a lifetime counselor in Southern California, and he deals with broken marriages, and very specifically, more often than not, broken marriages within a professional ministry environment. So he's seen a lot. And so we were talking about some of his experiences, and I said, because I work with children, I am inclined to ask you, what percentage of the problems you deal with in your adults would you say were based in childhood? And he didn't even hesitate. What do you think he said? 100%. So when we get sick emotionally, it's not unlike the way we get sick physically. We have to have some breakdown somewhere for us to get sick. And it could have been something that was building up, or a lack that's been in existence for a very long time. And sometimes it's right down to the very start of life. And so it behooves us to take a lot of caution about what we say. Here is a flashback to some of the things you might have heard as a child.
I have decided that I'm going to be a good father one day. I know I'm not even married yet, but one day I'm going to be a good father. And I know that I will, because I've watched you guys for so long in malls with your own kids. I'm going to know what to say. The things my parents said are still ringing in my ears. And so what I've done, I have compiled the 50 most famous parental sayings. No particular order. I figure everybody can relate to this, because either you are a parent or you got one. But I'm going to do these in no particular order, and I want to try to do them in less than 90 seconds. You better change your tune pretty quick or you're out of here. I mean it. Is that understood? Don't shake your head at me. I can't hear your head rattle. And don't mumble. You act as if the world owes you a living. You got a chip on your shoulder. You're not going anywhere looking like that. You're crazy if you think you are. If you think you are, just try me. I don't know what's wrong with you. I never saw a kid like you. Other kids don't pull stuff like that. I wasn't like that. What kind of an example do you think you are for your brothers and sisters? Sit up straight. Don't slouch. Would you like a spanking? If you'd like a spanking, just tell me now. We'll get this thing over with. You're cruising for a bruising. I'm your father. As long as you live in my house, you'll do as I say do. You think the rules don't apply to you? I'm here to tell you that they do. Are you blind? Watch what you're doing. You walk around here like you're in a daze. Something better change and change fast. You're driving your mother to an early grave. This is a family vacation. You're going to have fun whether you like it or not. Take some responsibility. Pull your own weight. Don't expect other people to pick up after you, and don't ask me for money. What do you think I'm made out of money? Do you think I have a tree that grows money? You better wake up, and I don't mean maybe. Do you act like this when you're away from us? We've given you everything we possibly could. Food on the table, a roof over your head, things we never had when we were your age. You treat us like we don't exist. That's no excuse. If he jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff too? You're grounded. I'm not going to put up with this for another minute. You're crazy if you think I am. If you think I am, just try me. Don't look at me that way. Look at me when I talk to you. Don't make me say this again. Bye-bye.
How many heard those words before? Some of them. How many have even said some of these words before? Afraid we have to admit that we probably have. Well, Cal and I are here mainly to share with you that words are so important to your spouses, to your work, everywhere. But words, and you can take this down, this is my saying, and I'll like you to remember. Words either build up or tear down. There is no middle ground. You're either building somebody up or tearing somebody down. So that's why we're here to share with you words. They're so important to our kids and each other.
Let me tell you how important this can be. In our very first seminar, the one that John Hood referred to on Sunday morning, there was a person who was a grandmother type whose father had passed away during the course of the seminar, and she had been to Springfield area to bury her father, and during the burial proceedings and the relatives talking and so forth, she and her daughter got to talking about grandfather, and her daughter just mused very softly, just almost sorrowfully. She said, you know, I always felt grandfather thought I was ugly. Now, if you know this family, you would know that the way we look at beauty, at least in our culture, they're gorgeous, the family is. So that was completely out of the blue. But the grandmother got to thinking about that. And by the time she came to class, she had an aha moment. She said, you know what? When that girl was 18 months of age, I took her to see her grandfather for the very first time. And I dressed her up real nicely and sat her down. I stood her up close to grandfather. The idea was that she was going to toddle up to grandfather and he would give her a big smooch and everything would be cool. Instead, grandfather leaned forward on his rocking chair and he used his reverse humor. Obviously, this girl was just a knockout. And he says, well, hello there, ugly. And it struck the grandmother to such an extent that she remembered it years and years later. And as she thought about it, she couldn't remember one other instance where that kind of exchange had occurred between her and her grandfather, or that she had ever talked with her daughter about this incident. But you see, a lifelong impression of how another person felt about her was born on the moment of a single phrase, hello, ugly. Now, in brain science, those sorts of things normally just go into what is called the milieu of thought. And that probably was part of that, but it was articulate enough so that it affected her relationship with her grandfather. And I'm wondering how many things that I ever said to my children that they are having to bear with them. And so I'm pleading with people every day take great care in what you say. Not that it should make us frightened of what we say, but pay attention. And we have watched wording very carefully, and we're going to share some nuances with you that I hope you really take seriously. You were talking about, no, who was it was talking about the okay. Oh, Diane. We're going to talk to you about the use of the word okay, because when you ask the word okay at the end of a instruction or a request, you're putting some kind of a decision in the hands of the child. And what if it's not okay? He's either going to chuck under to say, well, I couldn't say what I really think, or he's going to agree, but you don't really know what he's agreed to, because just because he said okay doesn't mean he heard what you said. He just learned that that makes daddy or mommy happy. And what we're going to talk about as we get into this is a learned helplessness, clinical diagnosis of learned helplessness. And we're going to tie the prolific word, use of the word okay, to risking the promotion of learned helplessness in a child. So those sorts of things can be very, very important to the growth of the child. And Carolyn has our mission statement up. If you'll go to your very first page, you go back to the other end of the book, and also the yellow-green pages have this as well. But you notice right here we have a 4 in the upper right-hand corner. That will always correspond with the pages in your notebook, which are in the upper right-hand corner. And so let's say this together. Here we go. To train adults in the use of positive guidance tools that encourage the inner growth of children. We're going to dissect that and take it one phrase at a time. And so here is the first phrase, to train adults. Now, King Edward was in the United States for a time, and after he was here for a while, he was asked clear back then in the early 50s, well, what did you think about the United States? And he said, well, I've been impressed with how well the parents obey the children around here. So that practice of letting the children be the head of house, a lot of times goes way back, and maybe that's something we need to review, and how much privilege or how much authority we give our children in the use
of positive guidance tools.
Positive guidance tools. Now, somebody in this recitation talked about the use of positive tools, and as young people, as young parents, we were taught to use positive tools, and I said, you know, that's a real problem to me, because I didn't understand all of the positive tools that were possible, and I thought that that mostly consisted of compliments and so forth to the child. And I said, you know what, if we would correct everything that needs corrected in these children, that's all in the world would ever do, you know.
That's what you thought.
And I hoped that someday I would be able to find those positive tools that the people were talking about but didn't seem to be able to articulate. Well, we're going to share lots of tools, 44. And we're not going to name them off one by one. And actually, I actually counted them in the presentation. There are 44. But there are 12 major tools that we give you, and then we tuck in a whole lot of others along the way.
That encourage the inner growth of children.
The inner growth of children. There is a huge misunderstanding in the way we talk to children about the difference between outer growth and inner growth. And so, although it might seem like just a matter of semantics, it's really much deeper than that. And here's a story that articulates that. A grandmother and grandfather who had not done so well with one of their children, their son, ended up adopting the offspring of that son because he was on crack cocaine and his wife was too, and the child was basically parentless. And so they decided they would adopt this child. Well, they heard about us about that same time, and they came to our class and they said, "Ooh, I think that we can rehabilitate our parenting practices." And so they came to our classes, and this grandmother drove all the way across from Independence to Overland Park to bring her child to school, went back home to work. At the end of the day, she came back. She did that for 2 years, which was a huge sacrifice, and very heavy intentions to do better with this child. Early on, she had come to get the child, and he was playing with the truck near the exit door. And she said, "Well, Charlie, it's time to go home." And Charlie said, "No," with his steel blue eyes. And she looked at me and she says, "What now?" And I said, "May I help?" And so I said, "Charlie, where does that truck belong?" And he said, "Over there under the shelf." And I said, "Would you please show me how that works?" And so he went over there and put the truck under the shelf, came back, dusted himself off like a worker man. His grandfather was a worker man, did big machinery. And he came back to Grandma and looked at her in the face and with a great big smile said, "Well, I'm ready to go now." And Grandmother said the doggonest thing. She said, "Well, it sure does help for a man to say it." And I said, "I'm sorry, I think you missed the point." So I said, "What you did is direct from the outside. I directed from the inside out." Well, what does that mean?
Well, I'll tell you, this really, really helped me, and I would encourage you to use the very same words. Where does that, if you get your children to pick up, where does that belong and have a place for it to go? And then you say next, "Will you please show me where that goes?" And then that's from within. They will draw from within and go put that toy or whatever where it goes. And they want to show, they live to show what they can do. So that is what I challenge you to write down is, where does this go and will you show me? Whether it's clothes, whether it's food, anything. That really, really works.
We talk a lot about managing from the inside out, and one of the key components for managing from the inside out is the question. Now, when it comes to the question, let's hearken to, since we're in a church environment, I'd like to help you understand how we attach this to some of the things that we teach in a Christian church. The question is so important. Jesus used lots of questions if you go through his teaching, and it started clear back with the Father
Adam and Eve.
in the Garden of Eden. The very first exchange between God and his creation was punctuated by 4 questions. One of them was, "Who gave you that fruit to eat? Who said you could eat it? Where's a woman?" Well, but these questions, was God asking because he didn't know? No, of course not. He was asking the questions to link accountability. And if you will take that, put it down somewhere in a really bold place, because questions, if they're asked correctly, link accountability, attach accountability. Now you can ask a child, where does your bottom belong? And make it sound threatening. Or you can ask, where does your bottom belong? Now you're asking the child to use his brain, and you're encouraging brain work. If all you do with a child is say, sit on that chair, and the child sits, you have exercised your power, and you feel really good because you have a good child who did just what you told him to do, which is no better than a robot. We need to raise people and honor the brains that they have been given in their creation. And one of the great ways of doing that is to use the inside-out method called the question, and we'll get a lot more into that.
Remember, the first question that the grandma asked was not a question. She was ordering, giving commands, and I found myself doing that a lot with 4 children. But she said, go put that truck away.
No, she wasn't even
That's the
harsh.
outside for sure, outside. And then when Calvin says, would you please show me? There's the inside out. Just
You got
try
any questions about that scenario? Because it's a key one we'd like for you to
very good.
remember as you think about this inside-out principle. I got an illustration for inside-out off the classroom today, and I'm going to share it with you next week. But this is the one for today. All right, now let's go to this. Basic concepts of low-stress management. Wait a minute, is that an oxymoron? Somebody raised their hand, they said, there is no such thing as low-stress child management. Yes, there is. And that's what we want to pass on to you. I probably will upset you if I say that Carol and I are both 75 years old. You probably thought we were 60 or something. But teasing.
I am 75 in 2 days. Thank you very much.
But we still work with kids every day. And let me tell you, we don't get the kind of kids that are woodwork. We get kids because we charge a little more than most people, we get kids from fairly financially successful people. And those kids that they bear or bring to life come hit the ground running. So we have children who would in other situations be really big problem children, and we work with them every day of the week, but we do it in a low stress way, and they turn out wonderfully. And so we want to share those ways with you. Now here are the ABCDs.
Page 7 and 8. A is adult responses. B, behavioral experiments. C, children's development. And D, discipline. That's positive.
And if you'll just stop on that page on 7 where it says ABCDs, that would be on your page 8. We'd like for you to circle the word discipline and also put below that direction. Carol and I are visited every year by the state officials who do their yearly checkup on our operation, and they always ask us for our discipline policy. And when we're ready to retire and have them shut us down, we want to do just a one-liner on our discipline policy. And that's going to be everything we do to guide the children. I know that won't fly, you know, but
That's why he says when we're ready to close shop.
when we're ready to close shop, they'll reject that. But I want to say, you know, most of the time, discipline is regarded as a negative experience for people. And we're going to give you a very positive view of what discipline is by our definition. So now we're going to go to this picture. And here we have a girl singing at the top of her voice. And she, of course, on the left-hand side is singing what she thinks is a very beautiful song. And the one on the right or on the left is not so sure, right? And we use this to suggest that some of the things we say might hit you as being objectionable, like this girl over here is finding the singing objectionable. But there are two things you can do with that that we would like for you to do. One, write it down as a question, and the other thing is to actually talk to us. You can actually raise any questions from the floor as well. I think by this time we've heard them all. We've been doing this for a very long time, and so
Your microphone.
my phone is just. I wonder if it died.
No.
It's back. I wonder what happened.
Just when you turned your head, it kind of.
Okay, I just wanted to say that what we have to say is, to us, the best news since spoked wheels or sliced bread. And of course, we're excited about it, but you may not find it that way, and you can certainly ask us about it. Any of the points along the way, feel free to ask something or even contradict us. I met with a negotiator one day who was taken up with our presentation, and he said, in negotiation, I am convinced that I don't really communicate with people until they argue with me. And so I don't mind if you argue with us. We'll be gracious. The point is that there's a lot to talk about in this course, and so maybe some of your questions will be answered as we go along as well.
So the concept A, the first one, here's the definition. The way an adult responds to a child's behavior is the main thing that determines whether that behavior will become a habit or be discarded. It's up to us how we respond.
Now, I want you to let that soak in a little bit. We had in our clientele a very perceptive person. He's the IT head of KU Medical Center complexes. And we had his then 2-year-old child who was a very, very high energy child. And he came one day and was musing on this, and he said, it almost always is about our reaction, isn't it? Our reaction. Because you see, every moment of time that you spend addressing something that a child has done, you risk telling that child how much power that had in your life. And you think that maybe by emphasizing it and speaking to it at the moment, that you'll somehow convince the child that they should not do what they were doing, or you should do something different. Most of the time, that is going to the brain stem, which creates an automated response, and it's not really going to the cerebral cortex at all. And we'll explain that in a slide next week. The way an adult responds does have so much to do with whether the child repeats a behavior. To a child, your response means success. If it's emotional, or if it's effusive in some way, that is success to the child. So you have to be really, really careful how you respond to things. And one of the things we're going to emphasize to you when we show you the picture of the brain, how the brain works on these things, is to let some time pass. You know, the heat of the moment is not necessarily a teachable moment. Now, as we go to the next screen, look at this header. It says, well-meaning things adults do that actually encourage unwanted behavior.
And now we need to number our
Now, all of you
activity here.
have in the back of your book, go to the very back and pull out your whole packet of papers. And this cover sheet is just telling you what to do with these. Now, everyone look at me, please. These are needing to be integrated into your notebook because we're going to be referring to these things as we go through the notebook, and this is the only time in this course that we're going to ask you to integrate them. If you do not integrate them, when we start referring to these things, you're going to be fumbling through and saying, well, now, where does this go? So your number one assignment for next week, the first assignment, and we're going to give you 9 others, by the way. The first assignment is to read, put this cover sheet on the back, and then notice the light gray print at the upper right-hand corner. That tells you where that page goes. And if you take, there's 3 that go up behind page 7. So there's A, B, and C. Without going to the rest of them, just take A, B, and C right now, open up your notebook, and put those behind page 7. And that will get you started. And we'd ask you to refrain from continuing that exercise. Just go ahead and put them in there for now because we're going to be referring to these 3.
I don't have an A either.
How did that happen?
You're the printer.
Okay. Isn't that interesting? Well, this is, I can honestly say that's never happened before. So here, I'm going to innovate, okay? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you just use the opposite page, and you're going to write these things down because we're going to be giving you these ideas. Just make yourself a list 1 through 9, and you probably want to be writing these things down because those will be the cues, and we're going to give you an assignment for each of these
This
things.
is what you're going to work on this next week and give you things to overcome the challenge.
So this would be 7A if you had it.
This would be 7A if you had it, and what I was going to ask you to do is number below these, you see, and that would be your assignments. But since you don't have this page, and I'll have to go into my computer program, it just never, I don't go through all of these pages to see if it actually printed. That's really something. But write down what is on the screen and then leave a space for the assignment, and we'll go on down 1 through 9. So the very first one is talk to
Or during a whine or fuss. And where we see this a lot is saying goodbye, whether it's in childcare or Sunday school or wherever, when the children have to wave goodbye or say goodbye. Usually, it's a whine or a fuss or something. And me being a mom, and most of you, all you ladies, you want to say, oh, honey, it's okay. I'm going to come back. I'll be back. You don't need to worry. And, we try to talk to that fuss and that whine. And they're not hearing a thing, first of all, hardly. But if your child continues to fuss and whine when you leave them, guess what? It's paid off. If we try to console them that way. So they need to experience it, but the main thing is you come back and you say, see, Mommy came back. I came back for you.
Okay, now, run-of-the-mill whining and crying and fussing. I heard a news piece on this maybe a year or 2 ago, and it was in response to somebody doing a research project on the most irritating sounds to human ears as we go through life. And do you know what the number 1 thing was, right behind scratching the chalkboard with your fingernails? The whine of a child. And so children pretty quickly learn how powerful that is, and then they start using it. And one of your instincts is something like my daughter did we were coming down from Pikes Peak one day, and we were driving along the road, and the child, then 3 years old, was talking to his mother, and the mother was driving, and she heard him whining, and she says, "Caleb, why do you whine so much?" And I just had to smirk and smother my laugh, which I eventually got to talk to her about, but I wasn't going to do it in front of Caleb. But he learned it from her, you know?
That's not very fun.
So what we want you to do is practice saying, and this is your assignment, "I'll talk to you when you're quiet. When you talk to me quietly." Or you can use other adverbs. "When you talk to me kindly."
And so you don't console them and talk to them right then and there, do you?
Well, there are times when you need to console them, but the main thing that we're aiming at here is that whine that is being used to get whatever it is what the child wants. You say, "I'll talk to you." And another expression that we use is "I'll talk to you when you speak to me with a steady voice." That works. A steady voice. And you know what? I hear parents trying to articulate that, and what do? Sometimes they say, "You may have that when you ask for it with a steady voice or with a kind voice." No, 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 no. The only thing you're committing to is to talk about it. If you tell the child, you may have that, or if you want to use incorrect English, you can have that. When you talk to me with a steady voice, you're using a manipulative idea. What you want them to do is reach down on the inside out, and come and talk to you with a steady voice. Maybe the time frame for whatever it is that they're wanting is worn out, you see. So the only thing you commit to is talking about the subject. Got that? Okay, number 2.
Rewarding a fuss. Now, a lot of times, if you'll just be quiet, I'll get you a piece of candy, or I'll do something for you. So how do we overcome that?
Well, these, number 1 and number 2, are really closely related. But by the way, the reason we're giving you these things is to give you some things that are pretty easy to work on, but are major faux pas in the life of parents a lot of times. And you're going to see a huge change in the way the children respond to you, and then you're going to be eager to come back and share your experiences with us, and then you'll be primed to go on into the rest of the program.
Well, what do some of them say? "You always gave it to me before. Why aren't you giving it to me now?"
I was just thinking about that this afternoon. We have a neighbor who owns a gold shop over on Metcalf Avenue, and he had 3 children, and the oldest one at the time was 10 years old. And we instructed about asking questions and so forth. And the next week, the parent came back and he said, "You know what? My son is now whining at me for asking questions." He said, "Just tell us what to do. Don't make me use my brain." Isn't that something? So, but this rewarding a fuss, we have a granddaughter who had a really, really piercing voice. And it irritated my mother because she had been hit by lightning, and certain sounds just wanted to make her go berserk. And that voice did it for her. And so her Thanksgiving meal, she was whining for some of that candy in the bowl. And my mom said, "For goodness sake, just give it to her." Yeah. Get rid of that whine. Now, we have an article. It's number B. 7B is I'll talk to you when.
It's part
So,
of your papers, right?
You all have that one. Okay. So that's your assignment for B. And so you kind of merge the A and B together. That article is really, really important to this. And you can innovate with it. However, what you want to do, the objective here, is to get the child to reach on the inside and quiet himself or herself so that she talks to you in a more rational way without that whiny emotion. And they can do it at the age of 2, just when they're learning to talk. You can ask them to do that and you can help them along, but it certainly will put you in the driver's seat rather than them in the driver's seat with this whine that will irritate you right into doing whatever it is that they want to do.
Number 3, coaxing or bribing. This is a little similar to 1 and 2.
Children have this really, really effective way of engaging you. They get you by the tail, so to speak, and they start being stubborn. And sometimes they're just stubborn for the guts of it, for the heck of it, if you will, because they want to see what you do with that. And the mother of a 14-year-old was in our class, and she was troubled with her 14-year-old's propensity to argue about just anything. And all at once she said, I got it. The girl knows that what she's asking for is not going to come to her, but she just wants to see me react. Now, coaxing and bribing, though. And so here is one of the primary or elementary uses of the think space. And
There's the thing.
okay, and so we're going to take this over here. We're going to give you a lot more instruction on the think space, but here's little Susie girl. And little Susie
Am I
girl,
supposed to stand in?
not yet.
Oh,
Susie girl is you got yourself together?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. And little Susie girl is playing, and I'm fixing the meal, and I'm saying, time to come to supper.
I don't want to come to supper. I'm not hungry. I don't want any.
Well, I'm like, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to argue with her? What can I do? Well, there's a really, really easy way of handling that. Here, come with me. Okay, see this little thing here? Okay. I want you to finish being stubborn right there. And when you're finished being stubborn, come see me. I'm out of it. I'm not going to argue with a girl. Now, in a perfect world, it would work out just perfectly like this, right? But
No, I was stamping, stomping.
now, the child may go into emotional tantrum. And we had a child with us, and it was his third day, and he'd never seen anyone use the think space, and he had never needed to use it to that point either. But he was just being very disruptive at the table, and I said, I'll take you over here, and you can settle down right here. Go ahead and do your disruptiveness right here. And I didn't really anticipate what would happen, but he stayed right there, and he didn't try to come off. And something inside of him kept him there, and he finished his fussing, and his stubbornness. And are you finished with your? I shouldn't be asking this, but I said when you're finished with your stubbornness.
Yeah, but I'm still not hungry.
Okay. Now, honey, you don't need to be hungry because eating together at the table is a family thing.
Okay.
Okay. And so now I have walked away from this conflict, and the child has learned that he or she has a place where she can deposit her stubbornness. I didn't criticize stubbornness. Actually, I don't want to criticize stubbornness because we want stubborn people in our lives. People who go doggedly after whatever it is that they want. I don't want them to look at stubbornness as a negative, but as a positive. And so I may talk to her about that later, but I'm for sure not going to categorically criticize it and trash the idea. See? So I can come back to her. There you go.
Edith, do you have any story on the top of your head? She can write a book. Tell one.
Well, oh, it's not on.
I guess I have a lot, so I'm trying to run my mind which one to say. But
Yeah, which one? I'm sure.
yeah, my second child is, they call them the strong-willed, and she's been with Carl since she was 18 months. So she's gone through this course, kinda. They do that at school. So she's very good because I use these things, so she knows. And so a lot of time the challenge I have with her is, like they say, the bribing and those things I used to do, but I don't anymore. But she always anticipates she has questions back to me. But the most one that I can relate, I think I sent him a video. She likes to whine there, and it's very hard as a parent. As much I've attended this class, it's just overwhelming. And so being there, like the last one that I had to send, and her, she now with the verbiage, oh, you don't love me, nobody loves me, I'm gonna die, stuff like that, and just sitting there to let her finish, and for about 2-3 hours. And so that week, like that day I sent him the video was, I don't know what started it, but she was crying and talking those things, and that's when they say don't talk to nonsense. But she was just on my face, and me being calm, trying to just be calm, and and so finally it was about, I don't know, maybe 2 hours, because she finished to that, and then she started talking about, like, she wants to die because nobody loves her and stuff like that. But I made it through. I didn't bribe her into doing anything. I stood my ground. So it's
She's had a lot of successes with that strong-willed little girl.
She's going to be a wonderful adult.
You said you're gonna
Would you please pick up the microphone and ask the question? Okay.
You said we're going to have more time on the think space, so maybe
yes.
you'll answer this
Yes,
question
and-
later. I was just thinking about the kid that doesn't stay there. How you, like, they run off.
Oh.
Like, how do you react to that? Do you
Have
just
you
keep
heard of-
taking them back?
There's
or?
a new kind of tape. It's called Gorilla Tape.
But anyways, you might address that another day, but I was just curious about how you would, like, she stood there. She stayed really good, but I just envisioning mine, like,
Yeah, and often children will do that in the outset. We
But you can
we
do it
think
with
that
each
we have
other.
had almost every manner of personality and disposition of child over the years. Hundreds of children have gone through our facility, and we've never had a failure with the Think Space because it is inherently it inherently resonates with the child if it's presented appropriately. And what happens a lot of times with children who initially find it unsavory or they dislike staying in the think space is that they have a heavy background or a consistent background of punishment for wrongdoing. And so they think that they are somehow thwarting punishment, and what we then realize is that we're not doing this as a punishment, we're doing it as a way for them to gather themselves emotionally, and children can understand that very early on. But we don't use the word gather yourselves emotionally. We say, we want you to calm down, be settled here. Go ahead, Art.
You take them and bring them back.
Yeah. But some setup for that too, if you want to start putting this into place. And I suggest that you read the book. By the way, the ThinkSpace books that you got, some of them look used. That's because they are. It's out of print. And I'm buying all the books around the nation, but I have to be careful how many of them I buy, because as soon as I start buying them, then the price shoots up. I saw one for $125 the other day. So I have to be careful about that.
I might give them to you for 10.
My question was just, how do you introduce the ThinkSpace to the child when all they see is a carpet, and how do you present that initially?
Okay. Well,
Have you ever used timeout in your home?
in fact, our unsuccess, our lack of success with timeout, is what eventually drove us to discover the ThinkSpace. And it's made us open to the idea. How do we introduce the idea? And that takes a little time. That will be part of session 3. And which brings me to the point, be reading the ThinkSpace. One thing that we have found over time with people who tell us that the ThinkSpace doesn't work for them, in every single situation I ask the question, did you read the whole book? And the answer is always no. And I'm not saying that there's something magic in the book, but something happens inside when you take the time to process the whole book. Okay, and then you get a little bit better picture. So I'm asking you to read. You have 3 weeks or 2-week periods to do it here. We'll be treating it in depth starting on the 3rd and going into the 4th. And if you look at your tabs, the ThinkSpace is right in the middle of all the tabs. The reason that it's right in the middle is that it is a centerpiece. We don't use the ThinkSpace very often in our school or in our operation because the kids are, quote, normalized pretty much. And so we use all the other tools. But the reason that ThinkSpace is in the middle is that it's a core philosophy that teaches us how to help children resolve their own conflicts, giving them time and space to do it with trust and with integrity, as opposed to our being the dictator of what they do. We're raising feeling, thinking humans, and there's a lot of really technical stuff connected with that. And the ThinkSpace, by the way, has received accolades from places. I got a call from the director of the Brain Rehabilitation Institute of Arlington, Virginia. And he said, this is the most important tool we have now in helping people rehabilitate their brains. And so I was really glad to hear that. And think of how effective it can be if we learn to use that effectively, even in the young years. I'm telling you, it's really a powerful thing.
I just want to give you a couple of thoughts, and you can always call us at home, and we'll make a date to talk about it too if you want to start using it and you still don't feel quite confident. But you too, each other, can practice the ThinkSpace. You say, oh, we need to be quiet or finish crying, so we show how one of you will stay on the ThinkSpace, not run away, or even if they run away, you bring them back gently and just stay here. And then you can even act like you're weaning stand right with them. I'm standing right here beside you. The next time we do this, I'm going to stand over here, and I want you to stay there. And many, many times, even the littlest ones will go, Mommy, 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 but they stay right there. So feel free to call.
We have 18 minutes left, and we're going to give you the rest of these assignments. And so here is the next one.
We never did have a break.
No. We used to do breaks in these sessions, and people over time said, let's not do that. You got too much stuff to share. So.
Well, number 4, real quick. Dramatic action. This is one thing that some of us might do. I would do. Somebody just spilled their milk. Oh my goodness, you spilled the milk. I've told you so many times to be more careful with that. Don't do that. Don't spill your milk. And they can even purposely start pouring it again. So if we're so dramatic with all of this, guess what? We're better than TV. And so they like the dramatic. So we got to watch out.
So our
the main assignment is
2 words: be boring.
Yes.
And for the next week at least, okay? And come back and tell us how that has worked out. But be boring as opposed to being dramatic with something when something exciting happens, you see.
Diane, you had
And Dan had his hands raised also.
Okay.
Go.
When you say be boring, are you saying just don't react, period, or?
Oh, no. You may react. We're going to divide the words react versus respond. Respond is something that you have thought about. It represents an idea that you may have processed ahead of time. I'm giving you the heads up. Your process is to funnel your emotional response into a less than emotional answer to whatever's going on, so that the children don't get paid off for their irresponsible behavior by your being exciting and giving them a show of emotion. So does that answer the question? Yeah. Yes, you need to respond. A lot of times your best time to talk about something, however, is not at the moment. There are several times when the grid work of a child is more open than other times, but certainly not when they feel like they're being threatened. And I don't mean by being threatened that you're going to threaten to harm them, but just that overwhelming presence of this giant person called mommy or daddy. When they're first, just about the time they're ready to go to sleep, and when they first wake up, and then other lap times and low stress times, those are great times to talk about incidents that have happened as opposed to the, quote, heat of the moment.
The next one, commanding, repeating, do this, do that, failing to follow through.
Okay, and I suppose most of us have been guilty of the counting thing. That falls
The next one is threaten, count.
The commanding, repeating, failing to follow through. Let's just go on that because there's an assignment for that. I want you to practice asking a child to do something only once. What? Certainly it won't get done. That's when you manage
From your feet, not from your seat. Stand up, go.
If there's a little assignment connected to this one. We have a very robust website called godwd.com, And it has a search tool up in the upper right-hand corner that's basically a concordance for anything else that's there. There's 125 articles embedded in there and dozens of other articles, 125 quick tips articles that we've written and dozens of other articles that we've written. And if you put in there manage from your feet, it'll guide you to several places within the website. So that's your assignment for that one. But beyond just reading at godwd.com, actually practice saying something once. And in those articles that come up when you put that query in there, you will find out that we recommend going to the child to help them get started on something if they haven't answered your request the first time. However, avoid saying again what you've asked them to do.
And say why.
Because you want them to have a memory, you want to ask their memories to go back and hear what you said in the first place. If you repeat what you have asked them to do, then you are teaching them that they don't need to listen the first time, that you'll just go ahead and repeat it. See?
They will recall.
And so you are, in a benevolent way, forcing the issue, forcing them to remember what you have been asking them to do. That's commanding. And then threatening. Another reading assignment is it's your 7C. There's a 2-column article there. The first column gives 7 things that you risk doing that are contrary to good growth practices when you threaten. And then the other column says what to do instead. And your assignment for this one, number 6, is to go the whole week without giving any threats of any kind. And I had an assistant pastor call me up midway through the week of this assignment. He said, "Cal, do you realize how difficult it is to do this assignment? Because the threat of some unpleasant occurrence is really, really a strong piece of equipment for a lot of parents. I hear it and see it all the time as people try to get their kids to do what they want them to do.
If you don't do this, you can't go to grandma's house.
And of course, they're still going to go to
Wi-Fi,
grandma's house so
just
that
Wi-Fi.
the child calls the bluff regularly. The next one,
What do they do instead of counting and threatening? Did you give an alternative there?
yeah, there's 8 things in the second column. Okay? So I'm not going to tell you all of them. I'm going to ask you to read them.
This one real fast. One of the hardest things is to have any child come to you and say, "You're not a good mom. You're a bad dad. I don't like you." Those are nonsense. And most of us would take it personally, be feeling really bad about that. But that's nonsense. And you know that within an hour, they probably come and say, "I love you. I care about you." So to answer nonsense is basically just don't say anything. Just don't say anything back. And then right before bedtime or some quiet time, you say, "You know, when you said you didn't like Mommy, that really hurt my feelings." We need to say kind things to each other. And then you know within yourself it's nonsense, but they can realize how you feel when things like that are said. Enough?
That's good. We all tend to answer nonsense. Another term for that is trial balloons. Politicians are fond of sending out trial balloons to see how something will play in the public's eye. Children send out trial balloons all the time to see what we'll do with them. And as Carolyn said, when you sense that a child is just trying to tweak you, then your best response is no response. Until later. If something needs to be said, then you do that later, but not at that very moment.
I have a kiddo who gets escalated if I ignore him. So in this, if like his thing is, I'm never going to play with you again. If I just completely ignore him, I feel like he would escalate. What kind of a response would you recommend for that? Or should I just ignore him?
Well, he probably has been successful in getting you to respond as he escalates. And I would be interested in see what would happen if you would just fail to escalate. But I would give him one response. I'll talk to you when you talk to me kindly. I'll talk to you about that when you talk to me kindly. Yeah, okay. We have a nearby friend, used to live just down the street from here, did at the time. He was putting his child to bed, and the child kept getting out of bed, and we taught him to just take the child back, not to communicate, and to stay real calm and so forth. And he was going to see how long that played out on a Friday evening, because he wasn't going to do it on a regular weeknight. And he did it 99 times. And finally the child...
He did.
And, you know, he said that solved the issue.
He would sneak out of his room and then go peek and see if Daddy was coming.
Yeah.
And
So by count. Okay, the next one is, where are you going? Answering interruptions.
answering interruptions.
Now, we want you to teach the children how to interrupt.
You're on the phone and
And-
you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings.
Yeah, and there's really just a great way to do that, and you'll garner the admiration of anybody who watches this too, as the children are execute this. I'm talking to Todd over here. Todd was so kind. 20 years ago, he gave us a phone system, and I call on you. We still use that thing. And he was closing Baskin Robbins mission office, and he said, we need a place to put this. Would you be able to put it to use? And so I'm talking to you like this, and this little girl comes up.
Daddy.
I don't
need
know if
help.
you remember this, but this was just
I
awkward.
need help. My doll's head came off. I need help.
And see, the natural thing for us to do is to just shut down the conversation with Todd and talk to the little girl. And so that's really awkward. So when you allow a child to interrupt while you're talking to someone else, you violate 3 ways. You violate the communication between the person with whom you were talking. You're making life more difficult for yourself down the road because
They'll interrupt again.
they will say, well, that's okay. And you're allowing life to be more difficult for the child, because that's a very, very unpleasant thing for most people to be interrupted just willy-nilly like that. And you need to help them have the courtesy to... now, so I'm going to say, Todd, I was thanking you for those phones, but my goodness, I'm going to have to take care of this situation. I'll call you back. Okay. Now, I'm going to practice with this little girl, and I'm going to say, honey, when your doll's head comes off, you need to come and hold my hand quietly.
Wow.
And I will show you that I noticed you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay. I'll hold your hand.
okay. So I'm going to... Is your doll fixed now?
No, you have to do it.
No. Okay, well, let's go fix it. Okay, here, your doll's fixed.
Okay, I'll
fixed.
take it.
Okay, now, be careful. Okay, now I'm going to call Todd. And so I'm talking to Todd, and something else happens to this little girl. I think the head came off again.
Didn't do it very well.
And I pat her hand, I'll nod while I'm talking to Todd. And then she can either stay there or go play. But she knows that I'm giving her attention, and I'm taking her request seriously. You know,
The neatest story about it is John and Nancy Hood were in our first class, and they did this for all their children and played it supper time. One got a phone call and whatever, but all the kids, how many? 6?
5.
5 kids, they went and held the mom or the dad's hand while they talked and practiced it. So all those children came out super uninterrupted.
And you can't imagine how impressed the parents-in-law will be when they see your kids doing that. But it's just really, really neat to watch a child use that kind of patience. Will you teach their children that?
Okay, we've got a lecture. That's it. We've got
And one more.
2 minutes. The lecture was Calvin was speaking with one of our little boys that got kicked out of 5 preschools, and he was quite a challenge, but his main challenge was over naps. He did not want to ever sleep, and he was about 4. So anyway, Calvin then thought he really needed a lecture.
Well, may I?
Hurry, hurry.
You rescued me from my cough.
Yes.
I stood him up on a couple steps so that I was close to eye with him, and I was giving it a little more than I normally would. And even as I did this, I was thinking, I wonder how this is going to turn out. And so, because what he had done was so off the wall, I really, if I had followed my own advice, I would have just let it go and talked to him much later. So I got done with my thing, and I did this nonsense tag on the end. Do you understand? And he points across the room, and he said, Calvin, why is there a fly in that window? Last lecture.
He didn't need the lecture.
That's a great metaphor for how effective those lectures are. Now, what we say about this is you do 3-sentence lectures. The first sentence would be what went wrong. The second one was how people feel about that. And the third one would be how to make it right. And end of session for that time. That takes about 30 seconds. And you will completely eliminate the lecture thing and the white noise of your voice. Yeah. The first one is what went wrong. The second sentence is how people feel about that, or if it can be a little discussion. And then the third one is how to make it right. How to fix whatever went wrong.
Question.
Now, do you phrase that as questions? Do you say, Nathan, what do you think went wrong? Or do you say, this is what you did wrong?
Okay.
Or do you say, how do you think that made somebody feel?
That would be preferred. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, time.
And that brings us to the end, and I'm going to have Carolyn scoot here a little bit. And here's our little mantra that we give at the end of every session, and actually it's on the bottom of the first page of your yellow-green sheets in the fly cover.
And when we're ready here in a moment, we'll all say it together as we conclude tonight.
Because adults usually treat their children the way they were treated as children, we understand that our work today is training children both now and for generations to come.